In this module, we're going to look at creating a little scene from Venice. We're going to see how we can just capture the notion of the Grand Canal. I'll just run you through how I'm doing it, and we're going to do a bit of reverse painting, which means we're actually leaving things out, which the eye will fill in automatically, but I'll explain more about that when we do that. So first of all, and in this case, we're not going to paint the sky. That is part of the negative painting. We're going to let the buildings suggest where the sky is. So that is another little sort of technique that we'll look at. So in this case, I'm going to look at the buildings first. We're going to actually create the domes and the lights coming. In most of my sort of work, I'm suggesting the lights coming from right to left. And in that case, the left-hand side of the dome will be more shadowed than the right-hand side of the dome. So in simple terms, we can put a point for the top of the dome, and then we can just create a nice dome curve, and we don't even need the whole of the dome. We can actually leave the right hand side of the dome completely unpainted, because our eye will actually fill in the rest. I'm just loading the brush up with a deep brown, burnt umber we call it, and we might mix in the tray and just tone it down, just to darken it a wee bit with some ultramarine, just to make it a slightly deeper tone. So remember, we can always change the tone or the colour balance by mixing, and just experiment on your little dish and you'll find the sort of strength of mix that you want. There's a second dome I'm going to put in slightly closer. So just, again, nice big curve. And the buildings are slightly overlapping, so we'll just suggest that by our lines, and there'll be tiny little shadows at different levels, but we'll put more detail in as we go on. You can drop another secondary tone in just to make the shadows sort of not just one tone. I've just picked up some of this lamp black that I've laid down and the burnt umber mix, and I'm just dropping it in just to tint the colour that we've already placed on the paper. So just to keep the context, we can actually put some columns in, which are at the higher level. So that's dark against light, and we can just helps us define the heights of the buildings. And then, as we're all familiar, there's roof lines and there's parapets at all different levels. The canal will just be in the foreground, and it'll lead us away and we'll have some gondolas on that as well. So we're not going to fill the whole page. We're going to actually use this as a sort of, we're not filling the whole page at all. We're actually just bringing the detail into the center of the paper and let the negative space fill the composition out. So on the left hand side, we're going to create, which is slightly in the shadow, and we've laid down a wee bit of ultramarine blue, and I'm just gradually teasing it down with the brush just to shape, but I'm leaving, again, a lot of white just to allow the white to become part of the composition. Window openings, very lightly, and it's a sort of, we're sketching and laying out our composition at the same time as we're painting, so it's quite useful. So going back to the main domes, we're going to take the buildings lower down. I'm just lifting some from the darker of the domes, and I can use that as a secondary little wash just to create paler buildings running away from us down towards where the canal starts to come in to shot, and then the canal will weave its way towards us and get slightly wider as the perspective widens towards us. So now we know the kind of where we're heading to with the wash, which we'll do for the canal itself. These pale washes are good because we can drop in little aspects of detail at any stage when they're dry, and that helps build up the picture. But keep it light and airy, because we don't want it to be too heavy, trying to capture the essence of the place. So already we've just sort of drafted a couple of domes, a couple of facades. We'll just do some facades in front. I'm just going to pick up a little wash from the tray. Again, I'm just doing one sweep on one elevation, leave a gap, because some will be having the light reach them more than others. So we can just see that light, mid and dark areas. At the end of the day, we're trying to create light, mid and dark to get the overall effect and balance. Now, what we'll do at this point, we'll take quite a warmer rusty orange. We'll just mix that in our tray. We'll take a tiny bit of red, and then we'll drop in a little bit of yellow. And then we can actually use that as a little wash in the foreground, as a darker wash, just to create kind of shadows running from the buildings onto the water. And it just gives us a nice little break. And again, there'll be ripples in the water because of the movement when we put the gondolas on, which are going to make the water look as if it's moving very slightly, or quite a lot when there's a lot of traffic on the canal. You'll be surprised how choppy it can get. So again, we can drop in, if we want to intensify something, we can just lift quite a strong pigment, a bit more orange. I'm just going to drop that in and just make it a bit stronger. Remember, it will always dry lighter, and I'm creating 2 bands of tone now. The light wash we put down and a little overwash. And at this stage we could drop in some of that warmer tone just to tone some of the washes for the facades that we've done. Just wee pockets here and there just to differentiate, because buildings are all about light, dark and mid, and that's what your viewers wanting to see. Okay, now we could do a little wash for the canal itself, because we'll let that dry and we'll just put a little... Now, the water in the canal is a greeny blue very often on a bright day, if you've seen it. So we'll take a little blue, which is cerulean blue, mix a bit of green. I'm just going to do a light wash, but I'm not going to fill the whole of the water. I'm going to leave patches of white, which would be the sparkle of the water from the sun, where there'll be... So we're just, again, this is the negative painting. We're letting the paper, in this case, do a lot of the work, which we didn't do in the other previous works. Now at this stage we could drop another secondary, a wee bit more blue, just to again act as a secondary tone, just randomly, and that's the wet in wet, and it will just dry and randomise a little bit as it blends on the surface of the paper. It frees you up if you let the brush do a lot of the work. Don't get tight with it, just let the brush run for you. Now at this stage we've got to sort of think, pull it together by actually just putting detail in. The detail will actually sort of really condense and polarize into the picture. Okay, we've set the general wash to the general composition, which is quite simple. Before we do that, I'm just going to take a little terracotta orange, just for a wee hint on the tops of roofs, just to give, and I'm going to put a little bit down back in that junction between the water and the buildings, just as a transition point. And I'm flicking the brush in just to, again, randomly mix on the surface, which is quite a good thing to do. And that helps us do this sort of loose style of painting. Okay? Now, if the surface is too wet before you drop in any additional detail, just check with a wee bit of tissue, just lift any excess, and that will mean that it'll dry a little bit quicker and it won't bleed so much. But we'll work in the areas that we haven't painted so far, so that means that we can actually be quite deliberate. I'm taking a small tip brush with it, pinching the tip to make it sharp, and this allows me to do some shadows and some details of some windows just in the building, just to draw our eye into the whole scene. A couple archways, and we can shadow, we can put a wee ground the building slightly. Again, back up into the towers, we can re-emphasise some of the shadow on these columns, ledges, some windows. We could even hint at a wee sort of balcony type. It's very typical of the Venetian buildings. And of course, as things get further away, remember they get smaller. It's the archways, even some steps. And we get little pontoons that come out into the canal where the gondolas tie up. So we could actually put a couple of horizontal darker lines from the buildings, and that gives us little pontoons for the gondolas to sit on. We'll put them in at the end. And I'm just going to tint that dome with a wee bit of that darker colour, just odd wee scrapings, just to pick out a wee bit more shadow. And on the left hand side we'll just do the same. We'll just pick out a couple of details under the ridge of the roof, a couple of window details, just to give us scale, because they're closer to us. So we could put an archway just in front of us, and we're now suggesting perspective down that as the buildings run back to further back down to the head of the canal where it opens up. And we'll just put a tiny wee suggestion of the terracotta tile pan tiles. And all you need to do for windows is dab your brush on the side, just pull it down, and remember it's a suggestion that there's a window there. We don't have to draw one in, we're just suggesting to the viewer. That's a thing that you'll get more confidence as you do more of that. And now we'll just to give it context, we need to put a classical little gondola, so we can do that. And the other thing that you'll get, and we're going to use that as a foreground, we're going to put some poles that are very famous for actually the tie-up mooring poles. So we've got the pontoons, I'm just using a lamp black to contrast with other light washes. And again, I'm just jotting in a couple of more window details, a couple of vertical lines just as the different buildings on different slide into the canal. And then the odd vertical line for the poles that are just the tie-up poles for the gondolas, and some at an angle just creates a bit of interest and leads us in, because if we put something very large in front, it leads our eye into the whole composition. And you'll see I'm just flicking the brush occasionally, and that's what you'll get used to. If you can get the confidence to flick the brush, it creates this loose style of painting. We're virtually sketching with the brush. And gondolas are very easy. Just think of it as a long, narrow curve. Do it in one action. I'm going to do a larger one at the front just to catch your eye as it comes into the scene from this side. Even if we do that, we don't have to know exactly every detail of the gondola, but we know, even if we put the wee finials at the front, which are the trademark, and that represents all the districts of Venice, and we could put a wee counter arc underneath just to act as a wee shadow, just artistic license into the water. A couple more poles, and dab a wee gondolier. I mean, they're in silhouette, so we don't need to pinch the brush, and it just gives us a wee focal point. Just think of the head, tiny wee dab of the head, just a couple of squiggles to create the body, and then of course classically is the pole for guiding, paddle pole, and a wee bit of where the seating is in front, and that's basically all we need to do. Just have a quick look around, see if there's any other details you want to add in. I've left as I say, the sky's been left completely clear. The idea is it's the contrast of the plain sky. You could put a wash there if you want, but you don't have to, and just it sort of frames itself. Now, one last thing I do, and this is just a point of interest. Take a wee strong dab of red, and traditionally some of the gondolas have covers on them as they sit. Even if we just a couple of strokes of that, or even the seating catch, it just draws the viewer in. So a wee bit red into your scene just acts as a reference point of interest. So again, what we're going to do is we'll just put a wee signature. And you know what I'm going to do? Now this is a point of interest, because that plain sky is very plain. All it needs is two little lines on each bird wing. And we've now created a point of interest in that completely plain sky. And that's a way of just, again, using that space, but not having to put a wash in at all. You don't always need to paint your skies. You could use this reverse painting or negative painting technique. So that's our wee module that has been on the cityscape of Venice. I hope you've enjoyed that. I've enjoyed painting it, and I hope you have fun, and look forward to see you again.